On June 28, 1914, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and his wife Sophie visited Sarajevo. Their appearance was meant to signal unity within a fragile empire, but instead, it became the setting for one of history's most consequential assassinations. As their car made its way through the crowded streets, Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist, stepped forward and fired his pistol. The shots struck both Ferdinand and Sophie, killing them almost instantly and shocking the watching crowd into chaos. News spread across capitals within hours, and governments scrambled to respond. What could have remained a localized incident between Austria-Hungary and Serbia quickly grew into a powder keg. The intricate web of alliances, simmering rivalries, and imperial ambitions transformed a tragic killing into the spark for a global conflagration. Politicians, generals, and monarchs saw the assassination not only as an insult, but as an opportunity, and they prepared for war. Within weeks, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, triggering Russia's mobilization. A violent chain reaction had begun, and what started on a Sarajevo street exploded into World War I, a catastrophe that claimed over 16 million lives and redrew the map of Europe. The murder of Franz Ferdinand was far more than a personal tragedy. It became a historic turning point, the moment when an empire's internal tensions spilled outward and reshaped global history. A gunman's bullets in Sarajevo turned rivalries into carnage and unleashed one of the deadliest wars mankind has ever endured. On July 8, 2022, former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe stood before a crowd in the city of Nara, speaking in support of a political candidate. As he gestured mid-sentence, gunshots shattered the air. In broad daylight, before stunned supporters and cameras, Abe collapsed to the ground. He was rushed to the hospital by emergency responders, but despite hours of treatment, he could not be saved. The assassin, Tetsuya Yamagami, used a crudely assembled homemade firearm, a weapon that underscored both the rarity of gun violence in Japan and the determination of the attacker. Yamagami's motives were deeply personal, tied to his anger at a religious group that he believed had influenced his family's downfall and that he associated with Abe. The brutality of the act was amplified by the shock that it occurred in Japan, a country long considered one of the safest in the world. The assassination reverberated globally. Abe was Japan's longest-serving prime minister and a major architect of policies that reshaped the country's economy and defense posture. International leaders mourned him as a statesman who had sought to balance tradition with modernization while strengthening Japan's global role. This act of violence highlighted an unsettling reality. Even societies with stringent security measures and low rates of political unrest are not immune to sudden tragedy. Abe's killing remains one of the most shocking events in Japan's modern history, remembered as both a national loss and a warning that no nation is completely shielded from political violence. On the evening of April 14, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln attended a performance of Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Just days earlier, General Robert E. Lee had surrendered at Appomattox, signaling the end of the Civil War. Spirits were high, and Lincoln sought a night of rest with his wife Mary Todd and their guests. Yet lurking in the shadows was John Wilkes Booth, a well-known actor and Confederate sympathizer who viewed Lincoln as a tyrant responsible for the South's defeat. Booth carefully planned his attack. He knew the play's timing and chose a moment when the audience's laughter would mask the sound of his pistol. Slipping unnoticed into Lincoln's private box, Booth fired a single .44 caliber round into the president's head. Panic swept through the theater as Mary Todd screamed, and the horrified audience realized what had happened. Booth then leapt to the stage, breaking his leg in the process, and shouted, "Sic semper tyrannis," before escaping into the night. Lincoln was carried across the street to the Peterson boarding house, where doctors did everything they could to relieve his suffering. But the wound was mortal. Through the long night, members of his cabinet and family gathered by his side. At 7:22 a.m. the next morning, Lincoln succumbed to his injuries, becoming the first American president to be assassinated. The grief that swept across the country was overwhelming, as citizens mourned the man who had guided the Union through its darkest years. Booth fled, but was hunted down 12 days later in Virginia. He was cornered in a barn and killed by Union soldiers. The assassination not only robbed America of its leader during a critical period of national healing, but it also altered the path of Reconstruction. Many historians believe Lincoln's vision for reconciliation between North and South died with him, leaving scars that would take generations to address. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy rode through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas, in an open-top limousine. Crowds lined the streets, waving enthusiastically as the youthful, charismatic leader smiled and waved beside First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy. At precisely 12:30 p.m., gunfire rang out, shattering the moment of celebration into one of horror. The shots were fired from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, where Lee Harvey Oswald had positioned himself. Kennedy was struck twice, once in the neck and then fatally in the head. Texas Governor John Connally, riding in the same car, was also seriously wounded. The presidential motorcade sped to Parkland Memorial Hospital, but within 30 minutes, Kennedy was declared dead. News of his assassination spread across television and radio with unprecedented speed, leaving the world in shock. Kennedy's death was not just a tragedy for America, it was a global event that left millions feeling as though hope itself had been extinguished. His funeral days later was broadcast to millions worldwide, with images of Jacqueline Kennedy in mourning, and Little John Jr.'s poignant salute becoming seared into history. Heads of state, royalty, and ordinary citizens alike joined in collective sorrow. Oswald was arrested that same day, but before he could stand trial, he was gunned down by nightclub owner Jack Ruby on live television. This dramatic turn of events fueled decades of conspiracy theories questioning whether Oswald acted alone or as part of a broader plot. To this day, the Kennedy assassination remains one of the most studied and debated tragedies in modern history, a defining moment of the 20th century. In May 2024, Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico was shot multiple times while greeting supporters in the town of Handlova. The attack unfolded in broad daylight as crowds gathered to see their leader up close. Suddenly, gunfire erupted. Chaos spread as security officers tackled the gunman and rushed Fico into a waiting car. He was taken directly to the hospital, where surgeons worked tirelessly to save his life. After hours of emergency operations, doctors announced that Fico had survived, though his injuries were serious. The attacker, a 71-year-old man, was quickly taken into custody. Investigations revealed that his motives stemmed from political disillusionment and anger, reflecting the deep polarization that has gripped Slovakia in recent years. The attempt on Fico's life underscored the growing risks faced by politicians worldwide. In Slovakia, the shooting sparked debate about political rhetoric, divisions in society, and the need for greater protection of public officials. Robert Fico's survival was seen as remarkable, a testament to quick medical intervention and sheer fortune. Yet the attempt left scars on Slovakia's political landscape, adding to a grim list of violent threats and attacks on global leaders. His shooting became a chilling reminder of how fragile political stability can be, and how swiftly it can be shattered by a single act of violence. On January 30th, 1948, India was still reeling from the violent partition that had divided the nation into India and Pakistan just months earlier. Mahatma Gandhi, the father of India's independence, tirelessly worked to heal wounds between Hindus and Muslims, preaching peace, tolerance, and non-violence. But his message of reconciliation made him a target for extremists who saw his ideals as dangerous compromises. That evening, Gandhi walked toward a prayer meeting in the gardens of Birla House in New Delhi. Suddenly, Nathuram Godse, a Hindu nationalist, enraged by Gandhi's advocacy for Muslim rights, stepped forward. At point-blank range, Godse fired 3 bullets into Gandhi's chest. The frail 78-year-old collapsed, his last words reportedly invoking God. The crowd screamed in terror as his followers rushed to his side. The news of Gandhi's assassination spread instantly across the globe, casting a pall of grief over millions. His funeral procession became one of the largest in history, with an estimated 2 million mourners lining the streets. Leaders worldwide paid tribute to the man who had inspired not only India's freedom movement, but also civil rights struggles across the globe. Godse was captured on the spot, later tried, and executed. Yet Gandhi's death left an irreparable void. For India, it was as though its moral compass had been shattered. His assassination underscored the harsh reality that even apostles of peace are vulnerable to hatred and violence, and it left the world wondering how history might have unfolded if Gandhi had lived to guide his people through those turbulent early years of freedom. On April 4, 1968, the fight for civil rights suffered its most devastating blow. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the voice of nonviolent resistance and equality, stood on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was there to support striking sanitation workers, but his presence carried far more weight. King had already become the moral compass of a generation, inspiring millions with his powerful speeches and unwavering commitment to peaceful change. Every step he took was followed closely by admirers, critics, and those who feared his influence. At 6:01 p.m., a single gunshot rang out, shattering the evening calm. A sniper's bullet struck King in the neck, and he collapsed instantly on the balcony floor. His colleagues rushed to his side, desperately pointing toward the direction of the gunfire. Within minutes, King was carried to St. Joseph's Hospital, where doctors fought to save his life. Despite their efforts, he was pronounced dead at 7:05 p.m., leaving the nation in shock. The news spread rapidly, igniting grief and outrage across the United States. In more than 100 cities, riots erupted as communities processed the unbearable loss. Authorities quickly identified James Earl Ray, a fugitive with a long criminal history, as the assassin. He was captured 2 months later in London and extradited to the US, where he confessed to the killing before later attempting to retract his admission. Yet doubts and conspiracy theories arose immediately. Was Ray truly acting alone, or was there a larger plot to silence King? To this day, unanswered questions fuel speculation, keeping the debate alive. King's assassination silenced one of the world's greatest advocates for justice and peace. But even in death, his dream endured. His speeches, writings, and legacy continued to inspire generations of activists around the globe. His murder revealed the immense danger faced by those who challenge hate, yet it also cemented his place as a timeless figure whose vision still shapes the struggle for equality. In the aftermath of World War I, the Armenian people carried unbearable grief. Nearly 1.5 million lives had been lost in the Armenian genocide, orchestrated by leaders of the Ottoman Empire. Among the chief architects of that atrocity was Talaat Pasha, who evaded justice by fleeing the collapsing empire. Settling in Berlin, he lived openly, confident that international courts would never hold him accountable. But survivors of the genocide had other plans. On March 15, 1921, Sogomon Tehlirian, an Armenian survivor who had lost his entire family, tracked Talat on a Berlin street. With deliberate precision, Tehlirian drew his pistol and fired a single shot at point-blank range, killing him instantly. The act stunned Germany and made headlines across the world. For Armenians, however, it was more than vengeance. It was justice, delivered by a man who refused to let Talat escape responsibility. Tehlirian was immediately arrested, but his trial unfolded in an extraordinary way. Over 2 days, his defense argued that he had been deeply traumatized by the genocide and that his actions were born from unbearable grief rather than cold calculation. The jury sympathized with his story and acquitted him, effectively legitimizing his act as morally understandable. Operation Nemesis, the larger covert campaign to assassinate Ottoman officials responsible for the genocide, demonstrated how survivors sought their own form of justice when formal systems failed them. Talat's assassination became a powerful symbol that some crimes, no matter how well hidden or politically shielded, could not escape retribution. On May 6, 1932, the French Republic was jolted by an assassination that unfolded in one of the most unexpected settings, a book fair in Paris. President Paul Doumer, an elderly statesman who had risen to power during a turbulent era, attended the event to show his support for France's cultural community. The mood seemed ordinary, with publishers and authors gathered to celebrate literature. As Doumer walked through the fair, pausing to admire books and greet attendees, a man suddenly approached him. Without warning, the assailant pulled a pistol and fired 4 shots into the president. The crowd screamed and scattered as Doumer collapsed to the ground, gravely wounded. He was rushed to a nearby hospital where doctors performed emergency surgery. Despite their efforts, Doumer died the following morning, plunging the nation into shock and sorrow. The attacker was identified as Paul Gorgolov, a Russian émigré with extremist views and a troubled past. During his trial, he claimed that his motives were fueled by anger at France's policies. Doumer's assassination rattled the French Republic at a time when it was already struggling with instability. His death was a grim reminder that violence could erupt anywhere, turning moments of celebration into scenes of tragedy. The killing of a president at a book fair remains one of history's most surreal and sobering examples of how fragile public life can be. On October 12, 1984, the heart of British politics came terrifyingly close to being torn apart. Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher was attending the Conservative Party conference at the Grand Hotel in Brighton. Unknown to her and her colleagues, the Irish Republican Army, IRA, had planted a time-delayed bomb weeks earlier, carefully hidden inside the hotel. At 2:54 a.m., the device exploded, ripping through the building. The blast killed 5 people and injured more than 30 others, leaving scenes of devastation in what had been a place of political gathering. Thatcher narrowly escaped harm, as the bomb destroyed the bathroom of the suite next to hers. Only minutes separated her from certain death. Despite the carnage, Thatcher insisted the conference continue the next morning, a decision that was seen both as defiance and resilience. The bombing also marked one of the most audacious assassination attempts in modern British history. On the night of February 28, 1986, Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme decided to do something ordinary: walk home from the cinema with his wife. No bodyguards, no convoy, just a casual stroll through central Stockholm. That night's simplicity turned into tragedy when a lone gunman stepped out and shot Palme in the back. The Prime Minister collapsed in the street as his wife Lisbeth screamed for help. Despite rushed efforts to save him, Palme died within minutes. The attack shocked Sweden, a nation proud of its political openness and tradition of accessibility. For decades, Palme had been a towering figure, known internationally for his opposition to apartheid and the Vietnam War. The investigation became one of the largest in history, involving thousands of interviews and endless theories. For years, no one was convicted. Swedish prosecutors finally pointed to Stig Engström, a graphic designer known as the Skandia Man, as the likely assassin. But by then, Engström had been dead for years, leaving the case legally unresolved. Palme's killing left an indelible scar on Swedish democracy. It reminded the world that even nations with a reputation for peace and safety were not immune to political violence. On March 30, 1981, the United States nearly lost a president in broad daylight. Ronald Reagan had just delivered a speech at the Washington Hilton Hotel when gunfire erupted. A 25-year-old drifter named John Hinckley Jr. pulled out a revolver and fired 6 shots in quick succession. One bullet struck Reagan after ricocheting off the presidential limousine, piercing his lung and coming dangerously close to his heart. 3 others were wounded in the attack, including Press Secretary James Brady, who was left permanently disabled. Secret Service agents and police subdued Hinckley within seconds, but the damage had already been done. Reagan was rushed into surgery, where doctors worked frantically to save his life. Astonishingly, he survived and even managed to crack jokes with medical staff. Hinckley later revealed he had been obsessed with actress Jodie Foster, claiming the attack was an attempt to impress her. Declared not guilty by reason of insanity, he spent decades in psychiatric care before being released under strict conditions in 2016. The attempt on Reagan's life reshaped U.S. security protocols around presidents and became a reminder of how thin the line between survival and tragedy can be. On July 13, 2024, U.S. President Donald Trump was holding a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, when chaos suddenly erupted. As Trump spoke to a massive crowd, shots rang out from a nearby rooftop. One bullet grazed his right ear, drawing blood and sending the crowd into a frenzy. Secret Service agents rushed to the stage, shielding him as attendees scrambled for cover. The shooter, identified as 20-year-old Thomas Crooks, opened fire from outside the venue with a high-powered rifle. One rally attendee was killed, and 2 others were critically injured. Within seconds, Secret Service snipers returned fire, neutralizing the gunman on the rooftop. Trump was quickly evacuated and later emerged with his fist raised, blood visible on his face. That image, both defiant and surreal, dominated global headlines. The attack drew immediate condemnation from both sides of the political spectrum. Investigations into the shooter's motives revealed troubling online behavior, but questions remain about how he positioned himself so close to the rally. The attempt underscored the dangerous climate surrounding U.S. politics today. Few American presidents have faced back-to-back brushes with death like Gerald Ford. In September 1975, just weeks apart, he survived not one, but two separate assassination attempts, both carried out by women in California. The bizarre sequence made headlines around the world, painting a picture of a nation on the edge. The first attempt came on September 5, 1975, in Sacramento. A follower of cult leader Charles Manson aimed a pistol at Ford as he greeted supporters. The gun jammed, and Secret Service agents quickly subdued her before she could fire. Just 17 days later, on September 22, Ford faced danger again in San Francisco. Sarah Jane Moore, a radical activist, fired a shot at him but missed. A bystander bravely tackled her before she could try again. These attempts reflected the chaos of the 1970s, an era of political assassinations, cult violence, and radical extremism. Ford remained calm throughout, famously continuing his schedule the very next day. While neither woman succeeded, the fact that two ordinary citizens nearly changed history within weeks of each other remains one of the most unsettling footnotes of any U.S. presidency. On October 14, 1912, former President Theodore Roosevelt was campaigning in Milwaukee as the Progressive Party's candidate when a would-be assassin struck. As Roosevelt prepared to address a crowd, John Schrank, a New York saloon keeper, fired a bullet into his chest at point-blank range. Incredibly, Roosevelt refused immediate medical treatment and insisted on delivering his 90-minute speech with the bullet still lodged in his body. Bleeding but unshaken, Roosevelt told the stunned audience, "It takes more than that to kill a bull moose." His defiance became legendary, reinforcing his image as one of the toughest men ever to hold office. Doctors later determined the bullet had lodged dangerously close to his lung. Despite the risk, Roosevelt recovered but carried the slug in his body for the rest of his life. Schrank, the would-be assassin, claimed he had acted on a vision from former President William McKinley, who had been assassinated in 1901. He was declared insane and institutionalized. Roosevelt's near-death moment remains one of the most dramatic assassination attempts in American history. It captured both his indomitable spirit and the volatile political climate of the early 20th century. These assassination attempts reveal the thin line between survival and tragedy for world leaders. Each story is a reminder of how one moment can alter history forever. If you found this video gripping, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives into the most notorious events in history. Thank you for watching.